Nigerian community and religious leaders seek to keep the peace as fears grow over the upcoming presidential election. A drug-resistant bacteria threatens lives in Kenya. And communications in Africa just got faster. We'll meet one of the brains behind the technology. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Nigerian troops are fighting Boko Haram militants to recapture the northeastern town of Manguno. More than 5,000 residents have fled the fighting. Nigeria's Middle Belt has long been the site of fighting between Muslims and Christians, as well as between people of different ethnic groups. Now, community and religious leaders in Kaduna State are making plans to keep the streets calm after the next month's presidential election results are announced. Chris Stein has more.
In Kaduna's Tudunwada neighborhood, mosques dot the skyline and schoolgirls keep their faces covered. Like many neighborhoods in the northern half of Kaduna, a city in Nigeria's religiously mixed Middle Belt, Tudunwada is majority Muslim. Across the Kaduna River, the city's southern half is home mostly to Christians. People of the two religions move freely and conduct business across the bridges that connect the city. But violence after Nigeria's 2011 elections deepened the divide between the two communities. Rioting broke out in Kaduna City, and many of the Christians who lived in Tudunwada fled for communities on the other side of the bridge. In the state's rural southeast, Muslims were killed or chased out of entire neighborhoods.
The Middle Belt is, as the name implies, is the Middle Belt of Nigeria, and it is the religious doldrum of the winds. Christianity coming from the south and Islam coming from the north, and both meeting there. And I see this strongly as an issue that violence may occur around the fault line.
Pastor James Wuye and other faith leaders hope they can prevent the type of violence that broke out after the 2011 polls, when President Goodluck Jonathan defeated his main opposition challenger, Muhammadu Buhari. Both are running again in this year's vote. Many in Tudunwada say local people did not trust the 2011 results, fueling the violence that forced Christians out of the neighborhood. Electrician Umar Hassan says it was not just a religious issue.
Somebody cannot just say the immediate result of the violence is either in the religious aspect. It's part of the agitation of the people within the country that they have not seen been treated fairly.
Alhaji Alatu Alkali is district head of Tudunwada. He says traditional leaders and the government are trying to generate jobs for young people to prevent the frustration that leads to violence.
Whenever we go for a meeting, and there's also emirate, the emir normally tell people to learn how to live in peace with one another, and then try to see that a job is being created, and then wherever there is chance for our people to be absorbed, we should try and do it. The government has been saying that peace, there's no development without peace. So whoever wants to develop, or whichever country wants to develop, there must be peace.
Local leaders have also tried to organize events to bring people from both communities together, such as football matches. Whether their efforts succeed will only be known after February 14th, when Nigerians elect their next president. Chris Stein for VOA News, Kaduna.
Well, Nigerian expatriates and activists recently gathered in Washington to denounce the deadly raids and massacres by Boko Haram. Some also urged that next month's presidential elections be postponed. VOA's Mariama Diallo has our report.
As the Nigerian flag flapped in the wind at the country's embassy in Washington, Nigerians living in the United States and other activists braved the cold to decry the recent attacks by the militant group Boko Haram.
And it's been estimated that at least 30,000 people have been killed. We have 3.3 million people who've been displaced.
Co-organizer of the rally, Omolola Adele Osho.
So we wanted to just show solidarity with the people of Nigeria, that we see them, We care about them.
I can go to Nigeria right now and I mobilize people in the south to go and deal with that issue for them in the north.
Oludare Ogunde says he's amazed that his country has not been able to stop the Boko Haram insurgency.
Boko Haram is about how many people? Probably about 1,000. Even if it's 10,000 people, how can they overwhelm a nation of about 180 million people with a strong military? So it doesn't make any sense.
Amnesty International recently released satellite images of Baga and nearby Doron Baga, two towns in far northeast Nigeria, that it says show thousands of structures were burned down soon after Boko Haram seized the area on January 3rd.
Baga victims need some peace.
Amnesty International USA co-organized the Washington rally. Adote Akwe, the group's managing director of government relations, says Boko Haram should be an issue in Nigeria's upcoming elections.
It is not currently being discussed as a major challenge to either candidates or to either political party. That shouldn't be the case. This should be one of the most important things that people address about how do you protect people and how do you address this threat.
Some of those at the rally did not think the elections should take place at all.
Until this issue of Boko Haram has been dealt with to an acceptable level for the Nigerian people, the elections need to be postponed.
Juliet Miriuki is from Kenya, but attended the rally out of concern for Nigeria. She questioned how fair elections could be held if it's not safe to vote in several northeastern states. President Goodluck Jonathan's national security advisor, Sambo Dasuki, speaking in London, also suggests the vote should be delayed.
Look at the possibility of shifting this thing and doing it when everybody has a card. Because it doesn't cost you anything, it's still within the law, and it is safer for all of us.
Nigeria's Independent Electoral Commission says it will do whatever it can to ensure that the hundreds of thousands of displaced Northeasterners will be able to cast their votes. In Washington, Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
Well, Libyan authorities say 5 foreigners and 3 guards were killed Tuesday in an attack on a Tripoli hotel popular with politicians and international workers. Security officials at the Corinthia Hotel say attackers stormed the building after exploding their vehicle and firing randomly at staff members. A number of guests are reported to have evacuated the building. Libya is struggling for stability more than 3 years after the ouster of former leader Muammar Gaddafi, with multiple groups trying to assert control. The United Nations had held a round of peace talks Monday in Geneva that included discussions of a future unity government. More talks are scheduled for Wednesday. Well, Tuesday marks the 70th anniversary of the liberation of one of the most notorious Nazi death camps of World War II, Auschwitz. U.S. film director Steven Spielberg is attending the ceremonies and visited a memorial installation called Pillars of Remembrance on the site of the death camp. Memory is life, Spielberg said after listening to a speech by the director of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum. Some 300 survivors of the death camp returned to pay their respects to the victims. Most of them were children sent to camp with their families, whose parents and older siblings often perished in gas chambers or from exhaustion and disease. Wreaths and tributes were laid at the wall of death, where inmates used to be executed by firing squad. One survivor recalls the horrors of the camp.
None of us believed that people worked in the mud, that when someone couldn't work, they were shot, that there were piles of bodies. After I arrived, I didn't need to imagine. I saw it. And that is why after the war, I couldn't come back here for 50 years, because I didn't see people. I only saw prisoners or bodies or the smoking chimneys of crematoriums.
Well, Auschwitz was liberated by Russian Red Army soldiers who found 7,000 prisoners, among them 130 children, according to the Auschwitz Museum. Now, the United States has carried out a drone attack strike on suspected militants in Yemen, the first after President Barack Obama offered reassurances the U.S. is continuing its counterterrorism operations in the country. The future of those operations has been in question following the collapse last week of Yemen's government. Here's more from VOA's Luis Ramirez.
It was only 4 months ago that President Obama called U.S. counterterrorism operations in Yemen a success.
This strategy of taking out terrorists who threaten us while supporting partners on the front lines is one that we have successfully pursued in Yemen and Somalia for years.
The U.S. had achieved some success in battling al-Qaeda and the Arabian Peninsula militants through drone strikes that were authorized by Yemen's President Abdrabbuh Mansour Hadi. With Mr. Hadi confined to his home and no longer in power, and Yemen's capital overrun by Shia Houthis unfriendly to the United States, the future of that counterterrorism strategy is uncertain. President Obama in India said those operations are still going on.
I saw some news reports that suggested somehow that that counterterrorism activity had been suspended. That is not accurate. We continue to go after high-value targets inside of Yemen, and we will continue to maintain the pressure that's required to keep the American people safe.
The need to go after AQAP became more urgent after the group claimed responsibility for the recent attacks in Paris. But President Obama has said he does not see the group as an existential threat to the United States. He has ruled out deploying U.S. troops to Yemen. The instability in Yemen is a headache for the administration, which is now having to revise a strategy that Mr. Obama says cannot be neat and simple.
We'll continue to try to refine and fine-tune this model, but it is the model that we're going to have to work with because the alternative would be massive U.S. deployments in perpetuity, which would create its own blowback and cause probably more problems than it would potentially solve.
While the Houthis are hostile to the United States, they do have something in common with Washington. They are enemies of AQAP. Analyst Anthony Cordesman.
The problem everyone faces is whatever happens to the Houthi, and they do have some ties to Iran, but it's certainly not sort of as a client. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is a branch of Al-Qaeda, Sunni, a jihadist extremist group, is a very serious threat. The Houthi are evidently organizing to try to fight it.
It remains to be seen whether having a common enemy will be enough of a basis for any kind of continued cooperation. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, at the White House.
President Obama says the United States and India must do better to capitalize on untapped potential in the economic relationship by removing some of the roadblocks to greater trade and investment. As VOA correspondent Arupanda reports from New Delhi, Mr. Obama spoke after participating in India's Republic Day celebration.
It is a seat that has been filled by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Russian President Vladimir Putin. But on this rainy Indian Republic Day, it was an American president who sat for the first time alongside the Indian Prime Minister for the 2-hour parade, watching camel-mounted brigades and military jets go by. The images of President Obama and Prime Minister Modi were not likely lost on India's neighbors, particularly China. White House Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes says greater India-U.S. cooperation will ensure stability and a level playing field in the Asia-Pacific region.
The signal is that we're going to be present here, we're going to be cooperating with India here. We share a set of common interests and values in this part of the world. And again, with respect to China, I think that signal is, it's not a hostile approach, but it's rather one in which we have two very big countries that are committed to upholding a rules-based way of doing business here.
And making it easier for India and the United States to do business topped the agenda during a summit after the parade Monday. President Obama and Prime Minister Modi met with American and Indian CEOs about the obstacles to boosting trade and investment between the two countries.
We do about $100 billion a year in trade with India, which is a great improvement since I took office, but we do about $560 billion a year with China. And that gives you some sense of the potential both for the kind of growth that India might unleash and the potential for greater trade between our two countries.
The president announced the expansion of the U.S.-India strategic dialogue and new initiatives focused on bringing more made-in-America goods into India and more U.S. investment in India's renewable energy market. Prime Minister Modi promised companies a more nurturing and open environment for investment.
It will nurture innovation and protect your intellectual property. It will make it easy to do business.
And with the recent announcement of a breakthrough in the impasse over a civilian nuclear deal, more American energy companies hope this will be the case. Arup Pandey, VOA News, New Delhi.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Well, coming up, a drug-resistant bacteria threatens Kenya. Stay with us.
Every song has a different meaning to each person that hears it and interprets it differently. Border Crossings is unique in that it lets the listeners decide what we're playing. But we bring in guests so that our audience has access to some of the biggest names in pop music today, and we reach out to the audience each and every day in different ways.
Welcome back. The rise of drug-resistant bacteria in Kenya could reverse the gains made by medical science over diseases that were once treatable. Kenyans could be at risk of fatalities as a result if the power in antibiotics is not preserved. Lenny Ruvaga reports from Nairobi.
With a population of 40 million, Kenyans could be at risk from a most unlikely source: antibiotics. In Kenya, the bacterial infections that contribute most to human diseases are often those in which resistance is most evident. Antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, is a scientific term that means antibiotics are losing their power to cure illnesses such as pneumonia, septic wounds, and malaria. According to a 2011 analysis in Kenya by Global Antibiotic Resistance Partnership, GARP, the rise in antimicrobial resistance is as a result of no new inventions of antibiotics in 25 years. KEMRI, the Kenya Medical Research Foundation, is the national body responsible for medical research in Kenya. National studies conducted by KEMRI in collaboration with international health organizations indicate that resistance to drugs meant to treat deadly strains of bacteria that cause diseases such as dysentery had risen to as high as 100%. Dr. Sam Karaoke, director of the Center for Microbiology Research at KEMRI, spoke to VOA and noted that this cross-resistance is also seen in animals.
There are farmers that use antibiotics for what we call prophylaxis or preventing disease. This is one of the lead causes also of development of resistance in the veterinary field. Yet the same products that you find in the veterinary field are the same ones that are used in humans to a large extent.
In 2013, 254 new infections of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis were reported as a result of patients defaulting on their medications. Loopholes also abound due to weak pharmaceutical policies that create a conducive environment for unlicensed or untrained people to sell drugs. Dr. Wilson Dungu, a medical practitioner with Joy Springs Health Services, says that this, coupled with other unscrupulous practices, has exacerbated the situation.
We can blame the willingness to enforce the policy. Either we don't have enough manpower. We can also blame it to the professionals. Sometimes they prescribe for due financial gains. They prescribe antibiotics where they are not necessary. And sometimes they should not prescribe even the antibiotic in case of common colds, in case of diarrhea.
Late last month, a global report commissioned by British Prime Minister David Cameron revealed that this resistance will claim 10 million extra lives each year and cost the global economy up to 100 trillion in the next 35 years. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, less than a decade ago, many African countries relied heavily on satellite connections for internet and telephone calls. Now, recently, there has been a revolution in communications with the connection of the continent to the rest of the world via undersea fiber optic cables, dramatically increasing transmission capacity of data and drastically reducing transmission time and costs. One of the most instrumental people behind the development of fiber optics is Thomas Mensah, CEO of the Georgia Aerospace Systems and an authority in fiber optics and nanotechnology. Mr. Mensah, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent.
Now, you know, when people turn on their laptops or go on the internet in Africa or check on their cell phone messages, they're just grateful it's so fast. What is fiber optics and how does this enable that kind of communication to be faster and more efficient?
Yeah, Vincent, fiber optics is really a very, very, very thin glass that people don't see because they always see the cable.
That's right.
Now, this glass has a coating on it that allows the glass not to break. That's how we can bend it and even put it on the sea. So when fiber optics was being developed in the laboratory in Corning Glass Works, it stayed in the laboratory for 15 years till I got there.
Yeah. So you didn't just study this, but actually you have invented and patented quite a number of things that are related to fiber optics.
Exactly. I was actually one of the 4 creators of this technology. Now, fiber optics is probably one of the most important innovations in this century. You know, the idea to use lasers to send Facebook pictures to your tablet, to your cell phone, that whole concept started somewhere in 1972. But it took 15 years for us to be able to mass produce it and mass market it because the cost of fiber optics was like $1 for a meter and copper was 10 cents. So it didn't make sense to go and rip all the copper wires all over the world and put fiber optics. But my first invention actually changed that, brought the cost of fiber optics to the same level as copper. That led to the spread of fiber optics throughout the United States. And also, a second invention allowed us to make strong fiber optic systems that you can put on the water or submarine to connect India, China, South Africa now, as well as other places. So we can pick up your cell phone and talk to somebody in Kenya, South Africa, or Ghana.
And you know, some may by now have recognized that you're not only a black person, you are a son of Africa. How did it happen that you ended up being one of these great inventors that has transformed not only the continent of Africa, but also the rest of the world?
Yes, I was born in Ghana, and luckily, when I was 4 years old, my dad used to read newspapers to me. So I was reading newspapers fluently when I was 4. And so everybody thought, oh, maybe this kid is up to something. And my neighbor was from Togo, which is a French-speaking country. So when I was 8, I was speaking French fluently. And so this is not a coincidence. This guy probably is somebody special. And so I attended at the Sada College, one of the top-performing boys' schools in Cape Coast. And I won the French-speaking competition nationally twice. And the French were, of course, watching me and said, oh, maybe this is a guy we can send to France.
And you spent some time in France, and I know that.
Exactly.
But about all the inventions, you've actually put it in a book, too, to kind of explain how it all happened and all the inventions that you have managed to patent up to this point. How many are there?
Well, I received 7 patents in 6 years. Normally, it takes people 10 to even get one. So the 7 patents in 6 years are all in fiber optics, really transform fiber optics processing. But I have probably about 14 patents in general in nanotechnology and other areas. And as you see later when we talk about it, I'm also creating what is called the first black Disney World.
Oh, great.
And there will be fiber optics in this park. And as we talk about it, it's an exciting thing, which I'll bring up, because we will redo the mid-passage, how slaves got here. We'll talk about that when we get there.
When we get to our other conversation after this show.
Sure.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Mensah, and thanks for the book. I hope we will be able to read and know so much more about you. Well, Thomas Mensah is one of the great inventors of this world, the son of Africa. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. One of the top trending videos on YouTube will have you wondering, how did he do that? We'll be right back.
خد حاجات كنزة. And they dig the bottom. Now we are losing it.
Matilo. You may be seated, Mr. Civilian residents
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. You never know what sort of video will go viral on YouTube. Well, in this case, we can certainly see why this video has passed 16 million views. In last Anderson, a new level of archery. A Danish bow and arrow expert is putting Robin Hood to shame. Since 2012, the Danish archer has studied and practiced old school skills and is now able to fire 3 arrows in 0.6 seconds. A truly stunning feat, making him much faster than the legendary fictional archer Legolas from Lord of the Rings. His newest video debunks several Hollywood myths and shows off amazing feats like grabbing an arrow in midair and firing it back and much more. But you'll have to watch this video to find out for yourself. And that's our show for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
I'm Eric Felton from Beyond Category. This is VOA. Follow us online at voanews.com.
We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. In a lively half hour, news, sports, health, lifestyle information, comments from our viewers. Africa 54, the best for Africa, about Africa. Join us only on VOA. I'm Vincent McCory from Africa 54. This is VOA. Follow us on Africa 54. Go to facebook.com/VOA Africa 54.